Today, let's dive into a fascinating yet often overlooked part of American history: how sexual concepts evolved in the 19th century. This isn't just a story about private life, it's about power, control, and the quiet acts of resistance that challenged unfair norms. Let's start with the heart of our talk: two big shifts that redefined what sex meant in this era. First, the way we labeled sexual immorality changed. Before the 1800s, it was mostly just shameful, a personal flaw. But by the 19th century, it became something bigger: illegal, or even a curable condition. The reason? People in power, governments, doctors, even former slave owners, realized sex could be a tool to keep different groups in line. Second, who got to decide what was right or wrong about sex shifted. In the 1700s, priests said masturbation is a sin and used the Bible to back it up. By the 1800s, doctors took over. They called masturbation a disease and pointed to scientific papers as proof. But this wasn't progress, it was just a better way to control people. Let's break these shifts down more. First, the rules for judging sex changed. In the 18th century, religious morality ran the show. What was okay or not okay with sex came straight from the church. By the 19th century, that gave way to pseudoscientific labels, terms that sounded scientific but were really just excuses for power. Second, the role of sex itself changed. It stopped being a private moral issue and became a tool for controlling society. Think about it. If you can say what's moral when it comes to sex, you can tell people how to live and punish anyone who doesn't follow the rules. Why did this all happen in the 19th century? Three major social changes set the stage. One, the Industrial Revolution in the 1820s to 1860s. It split society into clear classes: middle class, working class, and immigrants. The middle class wanted to show their moral lifestyle was better, so they used sex to call other classes immoral. Two, the end of slavery in 1865. Slave owners lost their legal power over black people, so they turned to sexual morality to keep controlling them. Three, the start of the early women's movement after 1848. As women asked for more rights, society pushed back using sex to trap them in chastity and traditional roles. Let's first look at gender. How women were controlled through medical labels. William Hammond, a famous 19th century doctor, wrote papers that many people trusted. But his big diagnosis, hysteria, wasn't a real disease. It was just a name for women who didn't obey. Here's how it worked. If a woman refused marital duties, like not wanting to have sex with her husband, she'd be called sick. That was the sexual trap women faced back then. The double standard was harsh too. For men, extramarital affairs were mostly tolerated, and masturbation got only small criticism. For women, extramarital affairs meant being shamed and left out. Masturbation led to a hysteria diagnosis and forced treatment. The goal? To lock women into the idea of chastity with strict rules. But there were rebels. In 1871, Victoria Woodhull spoke out: "A woman's body is hers alone. She has the right to choose her partner, leave a cruel husband, and say no to harmful sex. This isn't immorality, it's freedom." She even talked about sexual freedom at a congressional hearing, the first woman to do that. Back then, saying, "My body is mine," was bold, but it challenged the whole system of controlling women. Now let's turn to race. How slave owners used sexual morality to control black people. As early as the 1830s, Thomas Ardeux defended slavery by saying, "Black women can't control their chastity. White slave owners have to watch their sex lives, otherwise mixing races will break America." Those signs that said no black-white marriage, they weren't about morality. They were about keeping white people in power. Black women didn't even have the right to love who they wanted. Their sex lives were totally controlled by slave owners. And the gap between white women and black women was huge. Middle-class white women faced family pressure and public criticism, but they could usually choose their partners. Sometimes they even said no to their husbands, even if they were called bad wives. Black women, whether they were enslaved or free, could be forced into marriage by slave owners. The law banned them from marrying white people. and they were called naturally unchaste. They couldn't choose their partners, couldn't say no to sex, and lived in fear of sexual violence. Finally, let's talk about class. How laws targeted workers and immigrants. The biggest example is the Comstock Act, passed in the 1870s. If you look at how it was enforced from 1873 to 1880, the data tells a clear story. Police searched working-class tenements and immigrant neighborhoods most, while middle-class areas were barely touched. To understand why, let's look at 3 parts of the Comstock Act. 1. It banned obscene books and contraceptives from being shared. 2. When enforcing it, officials used stopping moral decay as an excuse to target poor workers and immigrants. 3. The real point. To legally call workers and immigrants sexual choices immoral, all to protect the middle-class way of life and keep the class order. Public opinion helped to, for example, on October 12, 1887, the New York Times wrote, "Tenement girls walk with men, live together without marriage, and won't have more kids. This loose morality is ruining New York. Police need to patrol more." This just shamed the working class, using moral purity to keep them down. Now, let's look at 2 quotes to see the fight between control and resistance. First, Dr. Hammond in 1878, "Masturbation makes you physically weak and mentally sick, especially young people and women. It's a disease that needs strict treatment." Is this control or resistance? Definitely control. He used medicine to call normal sexual behavior a disease, focusing on women and young people. It's just a way to control their choices. Second, Victoria Woodhull in 1871. "If you take away a woman's right to control her body, you take away her right to be free. Sexual freedom is the base of all freedom." How does this fight back? She says controlling women's sex lives is about taking their freedom. By fighting for bodily autonomy, she challenges the idea that women's choices are sick. It's a strong push against control. From all this, we can see the core fight. 1. People in power used pseudoscience, laws, and morality to keep gender, race, and class order. 2. Rebels focused on bodily autonomy, linking sexual freedom to equality for women, for working people. 3. The real issue. Sex was never just private. It was a way to keep the peace or break unfair rules. To wrap up, sexual concepts in 19th century America were a mirror of power. 1. Making sex, medical, or political was really about controlling groups. Women were called sick, black women lost their rights because of race, and workers, immigrants were labeled immoral. 2. Rebels like Victoria Woodhull laid the groundwork for later fights for gender equality and sexual rights. 3. The lesson. In history, sex was never just about love or shame. It was a tool to keep order war, a weapon to change it. Before we end, think. Do the 19th century rules about sex still affect us today? Understanding this history helps us see how power and sex are linked and how we can keep fighting for real equality. Thank you all. To back up the ideas we've discussed today, here are the key references that ground our analysis in historical sources. Comstock A. 1883. Traps for the Young. New York, Funk and Wagnalls. This book, written by the namesake of the Comstock Act, offers direct insight into the moral panic that shaped 19th century efforts to regulate obscene content, helping us understand the mindset behind the law's creation. Hammond, W. 1878. The Disease of Masturbation. Journal of Psychological Medicine.